Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi. Nielle is out today.
All right, coming up for you on today's show, Kyle Rittenhouse, his use of a self-defense argument has brought the case of another Wisconsin teen back in the spotlight. This one, a 17-year-old sexual abuse victim, faces charges in the same Kenosha, Wisconsin courthouse. We have the story. And Attorney Adrienne Lawrence will be here with us to break it all down.
Plus, we have updates in the McMichael case as we await a verdict. And we also have some updates on Elijah McClain's family.
Soulmates, we have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth. So let's get it.
We begin this evening in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but the latest news is not about Kyle Rittenhouse, but his successful use of a self-defense argument has pushed another teen's case back into the spotlight. Activists and community leaders are pushing for no jail time in the case of 17-year-old Crystal Kaiser. This is Crystal. As NPR reports, Kaiser confessed to killing the man who had allegedly sexually abused her multiple times. Activists say if Rittenhouse can successfully argue self-defense in his case, then Kaiser should be able to as well. Crystal Kaiser was released from jail after community leaders a state over in Chicago raised $400,000 to bond her out in June of 2020. Right now, she is still awaiting trial, and the case is being reviewed by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Here to discuss the specifics of this case, get a legal perspective for us, we have Adrienne Lawrence. Adrienne, I have worked with you before, excited to work with you again. You're an attorney. You are also a sexual harassment, abuse, awareness advocate. And so I know cases like this are really important to you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Brooke. It's lovely to see you.
We really appreciate that. This case is heartbreaking. How does the emotional impact of this case affect the outcome?
Well, you know, we'd hope that there would be enough emotional just advocacy and courage for people to be swayed. But unfortunately, it may not necessarily be enough of the case, because as much as Crystal Kaiser, she was 17 years old at the time and does appear very sympathetic, it's not very common that in sex trafficking cases that there is a self-defense, actual affirmative defense that is successful. And so Crystal Kaiser is essentially, she has an uphill battle, but the good thing is that she will be allowed to hopefully make this argument that she was acting in self-defense when she shot Randall P. Voller III.
Adrienne, I want to stay on that note there, because initially in this case, Kenosha County Circuit Judge David Wilk had said that Kaiser could not use the state's affirmative defense argument in this case because it involved a homicide. That had to go all the way up to a higher appellate court to allow her to even be able to broach this subject. And so, you know, watching the Kyle Rittenhouse case, for many people looking back on this case, many outsiders who've never been in a courtroom, never practiced law like you, they're surprised by that initial decision. I imagine that doesn't surprise you. Could you break down a little bit more why?
Well, unfortunately, the way our system is structured is oftentimes where only certain people get to be seen as being victims. And the thought that who can use self-defense, who can defend themselves, who is positioned to have a right to use force in society, it has unfortunately generally been allotted to white men. And so here we have a young Black woman who said she engaged in self-defense against a man who the state prosecution agrees sexually assaulted her, and that there was allegations of sex trafficking going on here. But there's no dispute that this woman was victimized. I think the bigger question here, at least as the prosecution is claiming, is that it was premeditated. The thought that she had showed up intentionally with the idea of murdering, killing this man, Valor, regardless of the outside allegations of sex trafficking and victimization. But to kill him, steal his car, burn down the house, and the thought that it was premeditated, and thus it was not something that was in the moment I needed to defend myself. And fortunately, now that hopefully she'll have this opportunity to raise the self-defense argument, we just should hope that the jurors can see her as a young Black child at the time as having that same vulnerability and that same victimization as it saw Kyle Rittenhouse.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And you kind of touched on it a little bit here, but can you just give us a couple of the similarities that you would say in this case? You told us a few, but what are the other similarities between the case that we just read and the Kyle Rittenhouse case?
Well, circumstantially, there aren't that many similarities, but what we do have is two individuals who are minors at times, who use guns to purportedly defend themselves, who also entered situations where they essentially had to defend themselves. The thing that would be very different about this situation here with Crystal Kaiser is that we had a man who was essentially victimizing her sexually. I guess he had been recording that victimization over periods of time. And we have to also consider the mental aspect, the psychological control, as opposed to looking at Rittenhouse's situation, where he essentially showed up self-deputized with his AR-15, and essentially when people tried to stop him or get in his way in some way, then he felt that he was in fear of his life. But, you know, I think the thing is that we really, really need people to see is that there will be situations where we have young children who are girls being sexually victimized. And when they stand up for themselves, when they fight back, that they are entitled to that same self-defense argument that is given to these white men who are out in these streets with AR-15s.
I agree. Adrienne Lawrence, thank you again for joining us here on Fox Soul's Black Report. Here's a question a lot of people will be waiting to see the answer. Do young black girls have the same amount of sympathy that a white man would in front of a jury?
Unfortunately not, because I think that we still, our society holds on to this thought of black girls being women and much older than they actually are. Also the hypersexualization that we black women, black girls face. And this thought that has been historically thought as being the case, the fact that black women or black girls are incapable of being raped, because it's this thought that we are the Jezebels. So even trying to see the victimization element of this man repeatedly sexually victimizing her, this older male adult who is a white man, and seeing the fact that she stood up for herself and she defended herself, and it resulted in the loss of a life of a white man who was under investigation for child porn and sex trafficking, and had also been convicted of various counts before. The fact that our society would still see it as the greater loss of life as opposed to her victimization as being paramount, it's just a reflection of the fact that we have so many injustices and inequities that are rampant within our society, particularly as they impact black girls and women.
So, Adrienne, you know, how do we fight against that? How does one fight against that? Because I think everyone can agree, if we're talking about, if we are in this space where, you know, many people are saying equity and equality should matter in every institution in our country, how do you fight back against something like this? For instance, in this case, what should be brought up in court? What would work, if anything?
Well, I'd say, first of all, it would be really nice if Kaiser has that same $2 million legal defense fund that Rittenhouse got by virtue of having all those Trump donors out there to contribute. It'd be great if we could contribute to Kaiser's defense so she can have the best and most aggressive legal counsel available. First off, that is huge because attorneys matter. And then on top of that, we need to use our voices and raise awareness. And we need to push to change the laws, because as we saw in the Rittenhouse verdict, the fact is that the laws, many of them are written in a way that is either confusing or they essentially slant in favor of those in power, so the white male patriarchy. And we need to change these things because, hey, there are women, there are girls in sex trafficking situations who want to stand up for themselves and want to exercise self-defense. But if the law does not treat them as victims looking to defend themselves, then in what is the point? You just become another convicted killer when all you did was essentially reject the notion that you would continue to be victimized.
Adrienne, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your expertise, appreciate your passion, and we hope to have you back because this has been really educating, I think, for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was so insightful. So the daughter of civil rights leader and activist Malcom X was found dead in her Brooklyn apartment on Monday. 56-year-old Malikah Shabazz passed away just a week after two of the men who were convicted of her father's murder were exonerated. The news came after finding out that the New York police had withheld evidence that could have proved their innocence. So Shabazz is the youngest of 6 children of Malcom X and half of a pair of twins. She was born after her father was assassinated. I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, especially on a platform such as this, but I'm going to say what a lot of people are all thinking, that the timing is just eerily shocking, if you will. And, you know, something just seems suspicious. They are saying that there was nothing suspicious, but just something about the timing is not sitting well with me right now. Personally, I don't know how you guys feel about the timing.
Well, I know they were saying that she could have possibly had food poisoning earlier in that day or maybe the day before. But I do know this, Dr. Martin Luther King's daughter, Bernice King, reached out and she went to Twitter and said sending prayers to the family. And it is unfortunate. It is a bad timing situation. But I feel for her and her family because they still have questions that need to be answered from the dad. And now this happens.
I mean, I think the fact is there is no such thing as good timing when a 56-year-old dies, regardless of the circumstances. This is incredibly sad. You know, she never got to meet her father. Her mother was pregnant with her and her twin when her father was killed. And it's a sad thing, obviously. So many tragic deaths, both her parents losing their lives in horrifically tragic circumstances. And now her at what I think everybody can agree is just way too young to lose her life. I keep thinking about the fact that her daughter found her, and that's a trauma that will you ever, get over? Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking about the family right now.
Absolutely. And that's definitely should be the goal right now, is to keep the prayers focused on the families right now, for sure.
Let's move on to our next story. This is something that we are going to continue to follow. We have been following. Right now, we can tell you 11 white jurors, 1 black juror have now been deliberating for hours in the case of Travis McMichael, his father Gregory McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan Jr. These are the 3 men accused of chasing and killing 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery. We will be closely watching this along with the rest of the country, and we will be here for you as soon as we get a verdict.
Yeah, we definitely will. And I would say this, the country's on edge. We saw what happened in the Rittenhouse trial, right? We saw the unfortunate situation, the verdict that came out. A lot of people are just unhappy with. And now we're seeing how he's been praised in so many ways. At the end of the day, the way they treated him and the way they spoke down on Ahmaud Arbery was so disturbing that the mom had to walk out of court. And on top of that, you think about the things that were said. Here's a man that lost his life way too soon for no reason, right, for simply jogging in broad daylight. So yes, people are waiting to see how this verdict's going to turn out because they're trying to make the two similar as in self-defense, and I'm hoping it doesn't turn out like that.
I think even in death, people are watching this and watching how this all play out and kind of picking up on what you're saying, like saying, this man is still not getting any sort of respect. And it's frustrating for many people to watch. There have been a lot of comments that have been frustrating for many people to watch. A lot of things, you've had to have Jesse Jackson come out and make a statement because he was frustrated with comments that were made. And this has been triggering, I think, to the least, for so many people across the country. But I will always, when we talk about this story, go back to the fact that we are in a different space in that technology has given us an opportunity to know more, right? What happened to Rodney King? We were able to see what happened there, but that was an outlier, right? And now we're in this space where you see what happens so often. You almost have to go out of your way in order to not see what happened in an incident. And just like in the case of George Floyd, there's video that plays a massive part in what goes on here, in what anybody is allowed to say, in what people are allowed to testify to, because there is video that can refute a lie. There is video in this case, but again, there was video in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. There is video here, and just wrapping it up, just what I will always go back to is that we did not see the video of his death. We did not see that for an incredibly long time. And then, now the world knows what he looks like. But we almost didn't even hear much about this case. No,
we almost didn't. And what frustrates me is when you have people talk about, well, the lawyers are just doing their job. This is why they're saying the things they're saying. It's a strategy to it. But it's very hurtful and very upsetting to the family and for those out there supporting.
Brooke, I will definitely say, when you say triggering, that the word triggering saying is triggering, to say the least. Going back to even George Floyd, that was the most shocking. I mean, I've never seen anything like that before. Seeing the video over and over and over in the trial, seeing the video, like you said, going out of my way. It took me, myself, I did not watch the video of George Floyd right away because I could not stomach it at the time. And so just going back to what you were saying, is because I was going to touch on that same thing, is that, you know, technology as of now has made it all of these videos so easily accessible that it really makes me wonder, back years ago, before technology was, you could just put a video of someone dying online, how many people didn't get a chance to have a fair trial, or even get a chance to accuse a cop of killing them because there was no video? And so my heart goes out to those people, because at least now, like you're saying, Brooke, having video, we get to see it and hold the people who are, accountable, hold them accountable. So the family of Elijah McClain will be receiving a settlement from the city of Aurora, Colorado, after the young black man was killed by police in 2019. The police used a chokehold maneuver on Elijah that has since been banned. He was also injected with ketamine, a powerful sedative that contributed to his death. This settlement is the largest police settlement in the history of Aurora, but even still, no amount of money can bring back a young life extinguished way too soon. McClain's mother is quoted as saying, "It's still blood money because the money has my son's blood on it." His mom has definitely been very vocal, and just really going back to, I want to touch on how much money here, $15 million to the family of Elijah McClain. And it just really is disheartening for me, and I know a lot of us here, to think about $15 million that a city, they're willing to give away let me take that back, willing to give a family $15 million versus do the right thing in a situation when you're here to serve and protect.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because, again, we have another city, another police department putting a price on a black man's head. We cannot bring this young man back. As a father, I think about this. You cannot judge a young man by the book of its cover, because he's walking down the street, it's nighttime, someone says, "Oh, he looks suspicious." You can't do that, and it's so unfair, and his life was lost. And we do understand that they normally had an insurance policy for like $10 million, but they did get an additional $5 million that's going to take from Aurora's general fund. That's all beside the point. Like the mom said, this is blood on the hands of this city because of what they did to her son. Do you know how hard it is for a parent to move on, knowing they've lost their son, knowing they couldn't be there to protect them? But the police were supposed to protect them from Jump Street, and that didn't happen. And
it appears the prosecution are also laying blame on the EMTs. We're seeing one of the rare cases where an emergency responder, a medical emergency responder, is also in trouble because of this. But just doubling back on both of these stories, and even I can add in George Floyd, because we've talked about this before. The initial police report in George Floyd's death mentioned nothing about a knee on a neck, nothing about that. It said a man had suffered a medical emergency. And had there not been video, that would have been the story.
Yeah.
Had there not been video in Ahmaud Arbery's case, had there not only not been video, but someone in charge who was willing to say, wait a minute here, there would not be a story. In Elijah McClain, this is another case where the public didn't find out about this for a very long time. The case had been almost considered closed. And now we've got people facing charges and millions of dollars to a family, and a huge awareness and the talk of laws changing because of what happened to this young man. And again, just going back to the fact that technology has really changed lives here. But unfortunately, it doesn't change the fact that I'm mentioning 3 stories where 3 men are dead, and their families, will no longer have them, will never have them, and everyone can agree in all 3 of those cases that there are 3 men who should still be here today.
Definitely should be here today. And so much, we bring you these stories every day. You may not get them anywhere else, but you're going to definitely get them here. And